Chapter 7. But the days to come were sunny and golden. Everything seemed bright, as if the world were made of daffodils and lilies, of springtime and sweet breezes. How warmly the rest of the squad greeted her. Kimmy Joe gave a charming little speech about how Althea was absolutely perfect for the team. Becky gave a little speech about how she and Althea were becoming great friends, and Becky knew that Althea would be a great friend to all the squad. Mrs. Roundman took pains to fit Althea's uniform perfectly. On the snowy white sweater, the golden varsity letter flared like a sunburst. Although Celeste was a lovely girl, said Mrs. Roundman, smoothing Althea's thick, gleaming hair where the pullover had mussed it up. With that pale colouring, she simply did not shine the way you will, Althea. Over the next several days she worked very hard. Becky and Mrs. Roundman stayed after regular practice to help with the tougher routines. Saturday afternoon would be her first public performance, her first football game. But either the girls were kind or she really was good enough, for nobody yelled at her. Nobody made a face when she needed a second or third try, though once was enough for the rest. Nobody said they wished Celeste was still around. After the hardest, longest afternoon of her life, Friday before the game, Althea staggered back to the locker room. She took a shower there, instead of waiting till she got home, something she would normally never have done. There is nothing worse than a girls' gang shower, except leaving the locker room with 3 hours of sweat clinging to your body. She toweled off, blowing her hair dry, putting her earrings back on. Mrs. Roundman seemed to be morally opposed to anything that dangled, and fixing the collar beneath her pullover sweater just the way she liked it. Exhausted, she made her way to the front hall. The high school foyer was a handsome space, with black marble floors and grey-striped marble walls. Announcements, bulletins, and the artwork of the week were taped everywhere. Scattered on the plant ledges and the steps were kids waiting for rides or the phone. One was Celeste. She looked like a plant herself, drooping and in need of water. She was wearing an old dress with too much material for her skinny body, and she was tucked into a corner of ledge and wall as if she needed several props because her bones had given way. Nobody sat with her. Althea turned her back. It was best to accept things. Celeste had gotten too much too soon, and she would have to scrape her life back together, and that was that. Althea could not get involved. Althea had enough pressures right now, what with her first game the next day. Althea raised her chin, flipped her hair, and thought cheerleader thoughts. Footsteps approached her. A voice said her name. Althea cringed. She could not make herself turn around. I can't talk to Celeste, she thought. I absolutely can't. It's too much to ask. Why didn't she quit school as well as quit the squad? It isn't fair of her to keep showing up and making you remember. A hand touched her, a hand that felt like a sponge, that seemed to have no bones and no blood. Althea tried to run, but she was rooted to the spot. She turned her head, and only her head. It was Jenny Marston. Jenny had been Althea's closest friend before high school. Jenny had been the one to telephone, to sleep over, to giggle and gossip with. What friends they had been, that inseparable, essential intimacy of junior high friendship, when sleep is not possible until you share every single one of your day's thoughts by phone. But almost the first day of freshman year, Jenny found a whole new set of friends. She and Althea had hardly spoken since then, and when they did, Jenny was embarrassed and Althea miserable. "Jenny," said Althea, relief sweeping through her with the velocity of race cars taking the turn. "Hi, been a long time. How are you?" Althea's uniform, folded so the yellow letter could be seen and understood, lay on top of her notebooks, swinging in her free hand with the blind-your-eyes yellow pom-poms. Jenny's eyes landed on the precious sweater and the beautiful yellow letter. "You made varsity," said Jenny. "That is so great. I'm so happy for you." "Thanks," said Althea. I'm free, she thought. No more pain because Jenny got sick of me. I'm Althea, varsity cheerleader, and she's just Jenny, former friend." "Yellow is your colour," added Jenny. "It's your dark hair, I guess, and your fair skin. You look perfect." "Thanks. I'm really excited about being on the squad." "I'll bet," said Jenny enviously. "I never even dreamed of trying out. I could never do the routines, but you kept up your dancing and gymnastics, didn't you?" Dancing and gymnastics. We used to take those together, thought Althea, and in her memory she saw two little girls in matching leotards, tumbling, running around. Best friends. Friend is a nice word, thought Althea, but best friend, that's beautiful. She wondered dreamily who among all her new friends would become her best friend. Althea made a quick and frightening decision. Becky had wanted her to have a party. She would schedule it right now before she lost her nerve, before she was overcome with hostess agony. "I'm having a party Sunday," she said. "Would you like to come? You'd like the rest of the cheerleaders, I'm sure." Oh, how she loved saying that. The revenge of it. Letting Jenny come to a party. "That would be so nice," cried Jenny breathlessly. "It's so nice of you to think of me, Althea." Althea smiled generously. She walked carefully to the exit, keeping her eyes on Jenny, making herself forget that Celeste was on the far right side of the foyer. Celeste, the only cheerleader who would not get an invitation, the only cheerleader who had been to the house before, the only one who knew. "I love a party," said Jenny eagerly. "Want me to help?" Althea's heart sang, her feet danced. "I'm having a party and everyone will want to come. I did it. I'm popular. I have everything." Chapter 8. The phone that had laid so quiet for so long was busy every single minute. Becky was delighted. "Of course I'll be there," she said impatiently, as if she and Althea had shared dozens of social events. "Call Kimmy Jo," ordered Becky, "and have her call the rest of the squad." "Is that polite?" "It's the way it's done," said Becky. So Althea called Kimmy Jo, who clapped her hands, a rather more frequent activity for Kimmy Jo than most, and said she couldn't wait and would call the others. Althea telephoned Ryan, Scotty and Michael. She, who had never had the courage to even look steadily into a boy's eyes, called 10 boys. Everyone was delighted. Everyone said yes. Partly it was because nobody had anything else to do on Sunday. She recognised that. Partly it's because they had never seen her house before, and it was the kind of house that everybody always wants to explore. But partly, she thought, it's me. With the last call completed, Althea walked slowly around the house, thinking of what she would have to do between now and then. Cleaning, purchasing food, dancing, music, tapes. The party must be perfect. It would be too cold out to dance on the porches or the lawn. Althea experimented with the furniture in the large parlour, moving it to this side or that to free up floor space. "I'm considering," said the vampire, "who I want." Althea's fingers closed spasmodically around the arms of a chair she had just shifted. Where was he? How had he gotten in? From her crouching position, she jerked her head back and forth to locate him. He was in the doorway, hands gripping each side. His fingernails were longer and sharper and seemed to be leaving dents in the woodwork. He rocked back and forth, chuckling to himself. "So many choices," said the vampire, the texture of his voice usually dark like pouring syrup, his much sunnier, as light and warm as honey. Althea stood up. "So many choices. He means my guests. He means... No, this is my party. My first party. I'm popular now. He can't come back into this." "I could bash him into pieces with this chair," Althea thought as she picked it up. "A chair?" said the vampire disdainfully. "I've avoided destruction for centuries now. A teenage girl with a chair is hardly going to slow me down." Althea made herself set the chair down neatly and quietly to show she was in complete control. I'm just changing my furniture around, she said haughtily. I am having a party this weekend, and you are not to be there. His eyebrows rose. They were arched like cathedral doorways, thin and pointed, vanishing under his straight black hair. With his eyebrows up, his eyes were very wide, too wide, as if they were glass balls that could fall out. I'm quite looking forward to your party, he said. He let go of the doorway and admired his fingernails. She thought of the people she had invited, of the necks he could grip with those fingers. Get out, she whispered. My dear, he said. How she hated the affection in his voice, as if they were companions of some sort, as if they had anything to do with each other. I'm not your dear, she said. Get out of my house. You forget, Althea, that I come with the house. I have been here longer than you, and I will be here long after you have departed. Being addressed by name was far worse than being called my dear. It was so much more intimate. It gave the vampire some sort of ownership over her. She wet her lips and tried to breathe evenly, but it was impossible. Her lips stayed dry and her chest rose and fell like a panting dog's. Go away, she said. I think not, because I do, you know, have ownership over you, Althea. He could read her mind. He was up inside her thoughts, underneath her skull. Was nothing safe from him? Not heart, not veins, not even thoughts? Althea felt the terrible cold of his presence, the wet woolliness of the air around him. I gave you Celeste, her voice cracked. And so quickly, too, he agreed. So craftily, carefully executed. I was grateful. But a party, 20 guests. I am really quite eager to meet them. She threw the chair at him, but of course by the time the chair had crossed the room, he was elsewhere. Try to control yourself, he warned. There is nothing to be gained by childish impulses. You and I have been very adult with each other. We made a bargain. I kept it. I gave you Celeste. That's it. That's all it was. That's all it will ever be. The vampire shook his head. She had seen him nod many times. Nod his head, nod his body, nod his cape. But she had never seen him shake his head no. And this, too, he did with his entire body, so that he rotated left and then rotated right. She felt that he could bore a hole through the floor this way and drill himself into the cellar. It's more, Althea. There's always more. One is never satisfied with what one has, you see. I am satisfied. You come to my party and I'll kill you. I will not have anything wrong at my party. This is the first time any of them have ever been here. It has to be perfect. I'm afraid, said the vampire, his voice as fluid as spilled chocolate sauce, dark and spreading and impossible to clean up. I'm afraid that you are incorrect, Althea. You cannot kill me, but in any event, nothing will go wrong at your party. It will be a wonderful party, my dear. You are a born hostess. He studied his horrid fingernails again, as if the wrinkled fold needed a touch-up. She envisioned him in some world, some room alien to her own, in front of some evil mirror, inspecting himself, admiring himself. He said, The tower room, of course, will be left open. My dark path will intersect with... No! There is no dark path anywhere. You won't get any more chances, shouted Althea. You had Celeste, that was your chance, so go away. Althea, I hardly think that Celeste, and Celeste alone, is payment for what I have done for you. Cast your short little memory back over the last week. Ryan, Michael, Becky, Kimmy Joe, Jenny. A terrible heat rose up in Althea, staining her cheeks red. The vampire was amused. Did you actually think they were paying attention to you because of the pull of your fine personality? Her heart turned into a furnace of rage and pain. How charming you look with those blood-red cheeks, said the vampire. Blushing is a trait that always appealed to me. You are sick, said Althea with loathing. Her whole body was trembling. Her skin literally crawled as if it were coming off. No, Althea, I am not sick. I am a vampire. You made a choice, Althea. You. He smiled at her, and the crescent of evil sparkled like diamonds, like the lost sparkle of Althea's life. You, he repeated. You, 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 you. That's true, said Althea, but I'm not doing it again. I'm popular now, and that's what I wanted, and that's where we stop. She felt as if every muscle had detached from its bone and tendon and was fibrating like a bad heart. How could he do this to her? Here's how we shall solve the problem, said the vampire. We shall solve it, said Althea in her hardest voice, by you going away forever and ever and ever. He tilted his head. He rested his crinkled foil fingernails against his mushroom-coloured cheek. He stroked his long earlobe. She had not noticed before how long his earlobes were, as if his victims in the last struggle tried to pull him off and stretched him. Very softly the vampire whispered, And you wish your popularity to go away, Althea, forever and ever and ever. The shaking muscles grew still, the pounding heart slowed, the flushed skin went pale. If he chose, the party that had not yet been would never be. Nobody accepted my party invitation because of a slow day, thought Althea, or because they want to see the house or to get to know me better. The vampire made them accept. It's his party. You choose, the vampire said. It was hard to talk or think or even exist. Choose what? Who crosses my dark path, of course. There will be 20 people you have invited, and no doubt 20 more you did not. You choose, he smiled. She shook her head. No, they're my guests. I'm your guest too. You opened my shutters, did you not? His voice was like tissue paper, floating slowly in the ground. Althea decided to call his bluff. You are depraved. You are demented. I will not do anything more that you ask. Accept that. I'm not giving in, period. That's final, she added. He smiled and nodded, his trunk pulsing back and forth, as if feeling a pulse. Somebody else's pulse. Teeth hung over his narrow lips like foam on a sea wave. What is final, said the vampire gently, is your popularity. Do you wish to make a fool of yourself at your first game? Do you wish people to laugh at you in public? Do you wish the squad to request Mrs. Roundman to remove you? Do you wish her at half-time to put one of those oh-so-eager junior varsity cheerleaders instead of you? His voice was slippery as silk and cruel as boredom. He said, I made you. I will unmake you. She thought, I can pretend to go along with him. That will give me Saturday's game and Sunday's party. Then I'll be safer, and I'll make it clear to him that this is over. A tape she had been rewinding in a cassette player finished its rewind, and she played it. Loud, pulsing rock music, guitars and drums, and electric keyboard thrust its way into the room. It hammered with a pulse of its own, screaming and demanding attention. The vampire frowned and turned away. Too loud for me, he said angrily. She made a note of that. She would have the house shaking with noise. I wish to have one of your guests, said the vampire. His smile was no longer evil. It was sweet and innocent, like a child going to a picnic. You choose the guest, said the vampire. It's entirely up to you, Althea. I would not dream of taking a friend of yours. Surely there is somebody coming who doesn't matter. If not, simply invite a girl who doesn't matter. Lots of people don't matter. I didn't matter a week ago, thought Althea, but I matter now. Am I going to give that up? At the party, he said, make your choice clear by putting your arm around the shoulder of your choice. Then turn your choice to face those hemlocks behind which the sun goes down every night. When I see upon whose shoulder your arm rests, I will know who follows Celeste. She picked up the chair and hurled it at him. An arm snapped off the chair, but the arms of the vampire were unharmed. She threw the chair again and again until it was nothing but splinters. The vampire was long gone. Chapter 9. The tower was a black cone in a velvet sky. Black needle tips of swaying hemlocks surrounded the tower like evil lace. Shutters banged with an oddly eager rhythm, as if something inside hoped to get out, but no one heard. Multiple tapes and CDs screamed from every corner of the house, and the throbbing drum of rock bands was the only beat the party guests heard. The house was overflowing with teenagers. Cars were parked everywhere. In spite of the cold and the dark, a sizable group danced on the wide pillared porch that circled most of the house. Some wore coats, some shivered in shirts. Several wrapped themselves and a chosen friend in a blanket and danced double. In the kitchen, litres of soda were emptied so quickly they hardly seemed to have been swallowed, just absorbed into the party atmosphere. In the parlour, kids sat on the floor watching a video Becky had brought. In the family room, they lay on their backs on the rug, giggling hysterically at the jokes from a radio talk show Ryan had taped. On the stairs, kids sat in layers, like children playing school, moving up one or down one, laughing and talking about life and football victories. In the side yard, 3 members of the football team replayed especially precarious moments of yesterday's game. And what a game it had been! All the requirements of football had been met. It had been a beautiful day, blue-skied and chilly. The stands were packed. Beyond the stadium, autumn leaves were orange and red. The cheerleaders were brilliant, their uniforms as gaudy as circuses, their screams as loud as rock bands. The team was superb, their plays executed like professionals, their kicks as high as home runs. And they won, of course. It's true, thought Althea. Winning is everything, and I am among the winners. It seemed to Althea that the house had been waiting for this evening, that at last the house could cast off doom and dark and return to the laughter for which it had surely been built. Its wide halls were meant for hand-holding couples, not ancestral portraits gathering dust. Its echoing parlour was meant for doubling the volume of music. Its huge kitchen was designed to feed dozens. Althea circulated. She laughed here, chatted here, joined this group and brought more chips and dip to that group. She sat briefly on the stairs, finding an empty step just below Ryan, who gave her a back rub. It started off masculine and athletic, as if repairing muscles, and became softer, smoother, the harsh digs becoming affectionate strokes. She leaned back against him and held his hand in hers. He cupped her chin, tilted her head back, and they regarded each other upside down. The house vibrated with music. Each area seemed to have been assigned to a particular sort of music. Your heavy metal room, your easy listening room, your memories of Elvis room. Everybody turned all this music up good and loud, and here in the stairwell it came together in one great chaotic throb. Speech was impossible. The night before at Michael's had been wonderful. No kissing, but lots of friendly flirting. No best friends, but lots of loving laughter. Being popular was temperature-raising. Her cheeks glowed, her heart was full. She was hot with victory and joy. She was hoarse from cheering. Ryan bent close over her cheek, and she held her breath, waiting for his kiss. But instead he shouted in her ear, "I went upstairs. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to look in the tower room." The tower room! A draught swirled down the long stairway and settled at the back of Althea's neck. She had forgotten the vampire. Saturday, the game, the cheering, the victory, the party at Michael's afterwards. There had been no room for thoughts of vampires. She had all teenager, all high school, all pretty girl. Ryan wanted to look in the tower room. What shall I do, she thought. How can I stop this? Where is the vampire? What if he appeared in front of people? What if they saw him? "It's locked," said Ryan pleadingly. "I can't get in." Althea smiled at him helplessly, as if locks on attic doors were the natural order of things, and she could no more solve that problem than she could change the constellations in the sky. She pretended that the din of rock music made hearing and speaking impossible. Ryan made sign language gestures, and they went into the kitchen for something to drink. How bright it was in here! The big double-wide fridge was open, with heads of 2 guests crammed in, inspecting the contents. On the counter perched a girl Althea didn't even know, crunching ice and eating potato chips. Somebody crashed my party, she thought, and she was oddly thrilled. You knew you were somebody when outsiders poured in, wanting to be part of the action. I'm the action, Althea thought, and when Ryan spoke to her, she grinned widely and sparkled and giggled. Ryan was only slightly taller than Althea, but much, much broader. He was wearing too many layers. White cotton turtleneck under a dark blue sweater with a darker wool sports jacket. It was a good choice, a little sober perhaps, but oh, so appealing. Thick as a football armour, thought Althea. What would Ryan do if I hugged him? He'd probably hug back. It's that kind of party. But I've never hugged a boy. Do I start now, in my kitchen, with all these witnesses? You're hoarse, said Ryan worriedly. Here, have orange juice. Pack in that vitamin C. He pushed away the 2 heads at the fridge as if breaking up a huddle on the field, and one of the heads that popped up was Jenny's. Althea's voice is always hoarse like that, said Jenny, smiling at the memories of their shared childhood. Ryan was disbelieving. Come on, that's from too much cheerleading. You could never cheer too much, said Kimmy Jo, exchanging an empty cherry coke bottle for a full root beer. Jenny embarked on a long story of how she and Althea had once decided to be the jelly donut eating champions of the world. It was 6th grade, said Jenny fondly, and every single Saturday night we slept over at your house or mine, Althea. Remember? We began our jelly donut crusade on a Sunday morning. By Sunday afternoon, Althea had not thought of those sleepovers at Jenny's in such a long time. What fun they had had, just the 2 of them. We had the nicest times, didn't we, Althea? Said Jenny softly. Althea was filled with remembrance. They had had nice times. Althea's eyes grew teary. Oh, Jenny, I've missed you. The girls moved towards each other, tentatively at first, and then springing across the kitchen. Althea even forgot Ryan. She thought only of the special friendship, the lovely silly years when life was golden and donuts were good. I've missed you too, cried Jenny. I don't know what happened when we hit high school. Something came between us. Let's don't ever let that happen again. Never, cried Althea, full of friendship, full of love. She put her arm around Jenny's shoulder and hugged her tight. Beyond the kitchen window, between the hemlocks, a path like a black sidewalk grew over the grass, slid across the porch, and crept through the silent window pane. It left slime, gleaming like entrails. Althea released Jenny and leaped back. I didn't mean that. Jenny and Ryan stared at her. Althea said, I didn't hug you. You aren't my choice. Althea ran to the window and opened it, screaming into the dark. She isn't my choice. But the window was already open. The kitchen no longer smelled of potato chips and dip, of pizza and pepperoni. It smelled of mould and rot. The kitchen was no longer bright and airy. The atmosphere thickened. Ryan coughed and said he thought he'd go back to the other room. Jenny said dimly, "Althea?" Jenny's face was strangely blank, as if she had temporarily left her body. "I think I'll go outside for a while, Althea. I need fresh air." "No," whispered Althea. "You don't need fresh air. Stay here, Jenny." "I've got to hang on to her," thought Althea. "Keep her indoors, keep her safe." But she was too afraid. She hugged herself to keep her from screaming again, and that left no hands free to reach out and hold Jenny. Jenny's hand fumbled for the back door and could not find the knob. It did not matter. The knob turned by itself. Jenny stumbled forward and could not find the step, but it did not matter. A hand appeared to help her, a hand with long, warped fingernails, a hand the colour of mushrooms. Chapter 10. The debris of the finished party filled the house. Crushed napkins and empty paper plates, ice melting at the bottom of glasses, and pizza crusts on the coffee tables. "What a success it was," said the vampire. "You can be very pleased, Althea, and don't worry about that little scene in the kitchen. I will see that nobody remembers it." Althea was screaming like a cheerleader, but throwing chairs and paintings and pieces of china instead of pom-poms. "Jenny will not remember a thing," protested the vampire. "You saw Celeste. It takes energy to have a memory. Jenny's going to be very tired." The smile that had stayed on Althea's face from Saturday's football game all the way through Sunday's party had exhausted her facial muscles. Now she had tics in both cheeks. Her face jumped and twitched. "That's not what I meant," screamed Althea. "I did not mean for you to touch Jenny. I yelled out the window. I told you to stop." "Once things are set in motion," said the vampire, "they cannot necessarily be stopped." "It was necessary," she shrieked. "I told you to stop. Stopping was necessary." "I thought you said popularity was necessary," said the vampire. "You can't have both, you know, and you made your choice very clear." "That's not what I meant when I hugged Jenny." "That's what you did, though," said the vampire, like a phosphorescent fungus. Althea ricocheted off the walls, pounding them, kicking them. "You know perfectly well that I was hugging Jenny because I felt affection for her," screamed Althea. "We agreed that when you put your arm around a girl at your party, it would be the girl who did not matter. In any event, there's no point in discussing it. It's done. It's over. There is no going back." Althea's knees buckled. She tried to hang on to the wall, but the wall was flat and offered no support. She sank to the floor. The floor was filthy, where people had tracked in dirt and stepped on potato chips. You depraved, disgusting, horrible." Althea could not think of enough words to fling at him. Jenny and I were going to be friends again, she thought. How dare he go ahead like that when he knew I didn't mean it? "Kindly stop placing blame on others. It's you," corrected the vampire. "I told you what the arrangement would be, and you accepted. You chose Jenny. You said that this one didn't matter." Althea crushed a dreadful thought. That girl sitting on the counter, the one who crashed the party. Why hadn't Althea put an arm around that girl? Nobody even knew her name. That girl didn't matter. Althea's hands and heart and spine turned cold and stony. "I thought that," she thought. "I am a terrible person. I must not have that thought again." "Everybody matters," whispered Althea. "Why didn't you feel that way with Celeste?" asked the vampire. He seemed calm, ready to talk philosophy all night if necessary. Not that there was much night left. She had no answer. "Because you wanted to be popular," the vampire told her. "It's very reasonable. We all want to be popular. You made a good choice, Althea. Why, everybody at your party wanted to come again. She thought of the goodbyes, so many hugs. She had been careful not to hug back, but nobody noticed. They said what a good time they'd had, what a neat house she had, what fun it was, how they must get together here all the time. What interesting people you had at this party, said the vampire. His voice was full of admiration. It glowed like a nightlight in the hall, safe and warm. You have so many good friends now, Althea. Better friends than Jenny. How good a friend was she to you? Wasn't she mean? Didn't she abandon you? Didn't she leave you to sit alone in the cafeteria? It was true. Jenny had been rotten and nasty, and Althea did have better friends now. Nobody could put Jenny in the same class with the cheerleaders like Becky. Jenny really did hardly matter when you compared her to Becky. Althea felt somewhat better. Think what a wonderful day Monday will be, said the vampire. He was leaving. She could see him growing down, dividing away, letting himself be absorbed into the thick, woolly air around him. Friends clamouring for your attention, friends begging to come to the next party, friends hoping to sit with you. He was gone and she was smiling. Friends, oh, what a lovely, lovely word. She would have them like a bouquet of flowers in a bride's arms, all shapes and colours and sizes of them, all beautiful and happy to be there. Friends. Althea straightened and looked around the house. She began cleaning. The mess extended to every corner. She swept, she mopped, she neatened. Plenty of friends had volunteered to help clean up, but yet she had turned everybody down. She didn't want her first party to end with scrubbing and stacking. No, her first party had to finish with laughter and the honking of horns and the hugging of friends. Friends, thought Althea. Her sweeping slowed down. Her energy evaporated. Jenny had once been a friend. Celeste had thought it was the act of a new friend to offer a ride. Althea dropped down, becoming carpet, becoming rug, flat and thin. Jenny would be like Celeste. Vibrance gone, energy evaporated. Jenny would trudge. And it will be my fault, thought Althea. I did it to her, my best friend. No, said Althea out loud. I couldn't have done that, not me. Her voice was all scratch and no sound, like the leftovers of a soul. How would Althea ever sleep again, knowing what she had done? She had destroyed Jenny, Jenny of childhood memories and childhood joy. This is how I repay her, thought Althea. I sell her to a vampire. Althea had cleaned up the bottom of the stairs. At the top of the stairs waited the locked entrance to the shuttered room. All I have to do, thought Althea clearly, is shut the shutters. I have to close him back up, bolt him back in. I can't save Celeste and Jenny now. It's too late for them, but I can stop him. I can prevent him from doing it again. She lifted her chin, set down her broom and dustpan, took the first step up. She felt strong and full of resolution. She was the kind of woman who could conquer whole worlds. The vampire said from behind the door of the shuttered room, Do you want the first party to be the last party? Althea held the broom tightly. Do you want to find out if Ryan will ask you on a real date? Do you want to know if Michael enjoyed himself tonight? Do you want to know if Michael was just accidentally everywhere that you were? Do you wonder why it is that Michael did not bring along the beautiful, perfect Constance? Althea trembled. The broom fell from her fingers and tipped against a wall. The vampire's voice was soft as cookie dough. Do you want to see if Kimmy, Joe and Dusty will invite you to their parties? If Becky will? Althea slid to the bottom of the step and folded over on herself, like an old sheet in a musty linen closet. Of course you do, he whispered. The vampire's laugh was like old leaves on dying trees. Now get a good night's rest, Althea. What's done is done, and nothing has happened really. Jenny's just going to be a little tired, and you have better friends than that now anyway, don't you?